Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pestana. And we're here today with special guests, Heather Choate and Marc Johnston. And they're here to share with us High Thrive Marriage Coaching. So does your marriage need a reboot, but you have no idea where to start? Well, today's show's just for you. So Heather Choate was diagnosed with breast cancer while she was pregnant at the age of 29. Told to choose between her life and that of her unborn baby, Heather developed a new perspective to her life and marriage that has become the bedrock, a foundation of trust, support, and faith. This unique perspective has allowed Heather to understand the raw, day-to-day struggles that couples face. She now teaches people around the world how to build a foundation of unconditional love for themselves and their spouse. Her business partner, Marc Johnston, has spent the last 15 years helping thousands of clients make real changes in their lives and save their marriages. As a co-founder of High Thrive Coaching, Marc shares his secrets of how to connect with your spouse and restore your marriage, even though your spouse is checked out and wants a divorce. So welcome to the show, Heather Choate and Marc Johnston.
Thanks, Marianne.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
What an honor it is to have you both here and to talk about this. Before we dive too much into the coaching, I would love to talk about your book, Fighting for Our Lives. And I think it's such a profound read. I'd love for you to share that with our listeners.
So this was a memoir that I wrote, I believe it was about 9 years ago now, about going through breast cancer while pregnant with our sixth baby. And I was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer, and typically people with that kind of cancer have a 5% chance of living to year 5. And so going through that and having doctors tell me I needed to abort my baby to save my life, and knowing that for me, that was something it was not the right path for me. And so choosing to keep my baby and overcome that cancer, going through chemotherapy, even while pregnant, going to, multiple doctors and experts, but really trying to listen inward into what my own guidance was. And I'm a person of faith, so guidance from God as well. And to navigate those different challenges is what I share in the book. And it's just really my raw journal entries kind of going through that experience. So it's a very vulnerable experience, but I felt like if it could help anyone else, then I wanted to be able to share it with other people.
I found your book, Fighting for Our Lives, to be such an inspiring accounting of what you went through being pregnant, fighting cancer, and here you are today working as part of High Thrive Coaching, where you're helping couples through their marriage. Were there lessons during that time that came up that helped you to become the powerhouse you are in marriage coaching today?
Yeah, absolutely. So it definitely pushed the boundaries of all the limits in every way, including my relationship with my husband and having to navigate through some of those things and those different challenges. But seeing that he continued to give me unconditional love, even though I feel like I wasn't really worthy of it or deserving of it, even though I didn't feel like I was measuring up because I wasn't being XYZ. I don't know if any of your audience can relate to this, but I felt like I had to be meeting a certain criteria in order to be worthy of love. I needed to be physically attractive, beautiful. I needed to be taking care of the house and the kids. I needed to be a good wife to my husband. And I got to the point where I was none of those things. At least in my opinion, I wasn't any of those things, right? I didn't feel beautiful or attractive. I was big belly with a bald head, right? Going through cancer and chemo, I lost my eyelashes. I lost my breast. I lost my eyebrows. So I didn't feel like the definition of feminine beauty by any means, right? And I wasn't able to take care of the house. And I had people coming to help feed and help clean the house and do things that I was just physically unable to do for certain amounts of time. And I certainly wasn't meeting all my husband's needs or able to be the partner that I felt like I should be in a marriage. And he continued to show me just unconditional love. And that was profound to me to be able to receive that. Meanwhile, as we're going through this entire journey, I saw other marriages struggle and other people that were also going through cancer or other challenges in life really broke their marriage. It was too much for the relationship to handle. And to me, that was a tragedy. And so I wanted to learn, how can we help couples to create this kind of unconditional love in their own marriages and create lasting commitment, lasting fulfillment. And so I came together with Mark several years ago, about I think 7 or 8 years ago now, and we set out to be able to help couples not only just save their marriage from divorce, which is what we specialize in, but to truly thrive in their relationship.
So when you started working with Mark, what did that look like?
Mark is a business partner, and we had been in contact over several years, and we had this vision of being able to help people, right? We knew that something needed to change. We realized that, divorce rates are on the rise, and more families are struggling. And so we wanted to find a way to be able to help turn around struggling relationships. So we put that together. And over the last 8 years now, we've really refined this process into something that we believe is the best out there. Like, we consider ourselves the ICU for marriages. We take only really extreme cases, and we help turn a relationship around even when the other person isn't willing to work on the marriage with them.
So I understand that the marriage coaching that the both of you do helps people find a different sense of understanding and awareness in their marriage. So how is that different than being in therapy?
There's a couple different ways in which we differentiate ourselves, both with method and philosophy and approach. So, as an example, like, one of the things that we offer is, because a lot of the times we are dealing with these crisis situations in terms of, like, just services that we provide. We provide a lot more services than a typical therapy office, where we are offering individual sessions, group calls, training videos, worksheets. Beyond that, it's because we focus specifically on, like, a very niche part of the relationship, like these crisis situations. We have a lot more experience than going into, like, a general therapist office. We found that over the years, having a certain approach to these situations has served us very well. So specifically, we tend to focus a lot more on, like, the narrative that's built within a relationship, how people subjectively describe the same situation in different ways, and we work towards, like Heather mentioned, building a better narrative, even as the other person might not be interested in working on the marriage. So even beyond that, I'm just aware of how a lot of therapy offices operate. And, if you go into therapy and say, hey, I want to fix this relationship, and my partner doesn't want to be in the relationship anymore, I would say most of the time those therapists are going to say, hey, that's not a situation that I want to support. And we are committed to helping people find out if there are some solutions still within the relationship to patch things together and to bring it back away from that edge. So, I mean, like, there's a lot of different things that we do in order to take it a step beyond just, like, simple therapy.
What are some of the topics that you typically see? I guess we'll start with you, Mark, in regards to people that come to you for just trying to repair their marriage. Because it seems like, I mean, with the stats that we have, marriage doesn't really seem like a winning topic for a lot of people.
Yeah, so we have a lot of, as might be guessed, we have a lot of people who come in where there's an affair going on. We have a lot of people who tell us that their spouse is considering divorce, or they might have already filed some paperwork. A lot of times, the phrase that comes up in other circumstances is this idea of, I love you, but I'm not in love with you. That's a pretty common one that we work with. But, almost all of the people that are coming our way, someone within the relationship is considering ending that relationship in some way, or is seriously pulling away. So this might be divorce papers filed, or it might be separation, or it might be even just serious thoughts of divorce. And that's primarily what we deal with, is all those really deeply troubling crisis moments in marriage.
And what would you like to add to that, Heather?
Yeah, so it's obviously a really challenging situation.
Mhm.
We often deal with spouses, in addition to what Mark talked about, where the person that comes to us wants to work on the marriage, but their spouse does not. And a big myth out there is that it takes two to tango, right? It eventually does, but you can save your marriage on your own because you are 50% of the equation. And so what we help people do is learn how to save their marriage on their own by being willing to go first and working on things first to change their half of the equation. And as we do that, we show them how to draw their spouse back to them. So we specifically help people that are wanting to work on the relationship, but their spouse is unwilling to for a variety of reasons, but we cut through all of that and help them want to work on the relationship with them again.
I think I've heard that quite often where maybe one partner wants to work on the relationship and the other one is just not having it. So it would seem that it's difficult to get to a place of peace with that going on. How do you guys do that?
Well, we've kind of, as Heather alluded to earlier, we've kind of worked this down into a science. If I had to give a very broad overview, we first start off just trying to gain a little bit of understanding for the situation. A lot of what we're looking for is this negative narrative that's been building up within the relationship. Two very specific points that we try to find are this idea of what's called the impossible problem and the root issues. The impossible problem is basically like whatever is justifying pulling away. So if they say, hey, I don't feel heard within my marriage, or I just can't find that happily ever after in the marriage, and they say, I've tried solving this, I've tried doing something about this, and it just isn't working anymore. That's an important part in this first stage. And then the root issues are all of those patterns of behavior that have maintained the impossible problem. What we try to do is we try to help our clients to first make the changes that they need to make and be able to communicate those changes well, be able to communicate a lot of the hope and ability to make things better in these early stages in the process. Nearly always, I would say 95% of the time, we encounter what we refer to as the resistance phase within the process, where the person who's pulling away does not immediately accept these changes, and they push back. And a lot of the times it's because they themselves don't trust that changes are real or permanent or lasting or genuine. And so we take some time to troubleshoot through that. And as we establish that a lot of these changes are more real, we start rolling out more accountability, more trying to support the other partner, the one who's pulling away, trying to help them feel confident in their own ability to have an impact on the relationship through the client that we are working with. It's and we've worked it over time and time again, refined it and refined it and refined it, and we found over and over again that as people go through this process, if they stick to the plan, that we have a really good chance of making a lot of these marriages that seem over, bring them back to life and back to some happiness.
What are some of the strengths that each of you bring to the coaching that you do, to this work partnership that you have?
So I feel like I bring a lot of the connectedness to people emotionally and understanding what they're going through. Marc is very empathetic as well. And having that perspective on going through really hard challenges and what it takes to overcome them, how to listen to your internal voice. One of the things that almost every client experiences when they come to us is immense amount of fear. They're worried about losing their partner. They're worried about the future. They're worried about what it means to be alone. They're worried about the kids. There's so much fear that really clouds them. And so we help them understand how to process through those emotions of fear and pain and anger that otherwise would keep them really stuck in a negative loop with their spouse, right? A negative pattern, and would continue to self-sabotage them. So it's okay to feel those things, but what we want to do is process them and learn from them, and then get back to who we really want to be and what we really want to achieve in the relationship. And I love that Marc guides people through this very systematic approach on exactly how to do that.
Well, it sounds like it's such a great partnership that the both of you have bringing that together. And I was real impressed how you also talk about when people are in this place of fear, you may have a spouse that says, "Hey, I'm done. I've had enough." But there's still room to work through that.
That's right. And the thing I'd like to add here is what not to do, because I feel like that's a huge aha moment for most people. And I feel like this is why most people don't save their marriage, is that when you go into that fear because your spouse is pulling away, you get a little freaked out, right? You're like, don't leave, come back to me. I want to feel safe. I want to feel secure. And we tend to see some behaviors in most people, like in fact, I said like 99% of people, including myself, have made one, if not all of these mistakes. And that includes begging them to come back. Like, please don't go. Please don't leave me. Please give me another chance. I'm begging you. I'll do anything. I'll make all these positive changes. Sometimes that looks like demanding that they go to therapy, demanding that they work on the marriage, demanding they talk about something, demanding that your spouse change, leave the affair partner, do it for the kids, whatever. The other one's manipulating, trying to manipulate your spouse to come back. Sometimes you might try to make them jealous, do the jealousy game to make them see what they're missing, or you might use the kids against them, different kinds of things that people do to try to manipulate their spouse. And the biggest one that's most detrimental of all is just giving up. You think there's nothing that you can do. It's hopeless. We all know we can't control our partner, and that's true. But what you don't realize is all the things that you can control in yourself that will make a difference with your partner. Sometimes we freeze out of fear, right? These are all mistakes that people make that only push your spouse further away. So it's really important to identify what's not working and then what you need to do instead.
I understand you both have saved thousands of marriages. Is there a coaching process that you take couples on?
Right. So we offer one-on-one coaching with our coaches. Marc Johnston is our head marriage coach. And we guide them through exactly what to do to stop pushing their spouse further away, how to kind of stop the bleeding. Like if we're going to use the ICU analogy, right? This is, again, what really makes us different from therapy or other, experts out there, is we've got to get things stable. And too often you're trying to push for commitment or connection too soon, right? And so we make things stable in the relationship, stop the bleeding so that then it can get strong enough to heal. We also do an online course that is on our website as well, if coaching is not a good fit or not available to you right now. And so we have a course that you can do on your own, but we really recommend that you get expert guidance care, right? I wouldn't have gone on a course to learn how to overcome breast cancer. And we recommend people get the very best expert care that they can so that they can successfully navigate challenges in their marriage.
So, what marriage advice would you like to give our couples today who are really struggling in their relationship?
In terms of struggles, I would usually recommend that people don't wait or don't sit on things. Far too often, a lot of the crisis situations that we encounter within our organization, a lot of these crises could have been averted if people had actually just sat down to try and talk things over or to get some help much sooner in the process. Almost always, like these problems come down to some breakdowns in communication, or someone not speaking up enough, or not being, not setting some proper boundaries soon enough, and then it just starts to bubble up and boil over until it explodes. And so, what I would say is, if there are some struggles, please, 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 just sit down with your partner. Be very direct with them and say, "Hey, look, this marriage is important enough to me that I want to get some help." And by all means, as you're looking for help, one small extra bit there is please find someone who specifically specializes in relationships. If it's not us, sure, great, come to us. But if it's not us, please, go to someone who knows what they're doing.
Heather, what type of clients do you typically see? Is it people who are very successful in their business and now they are looking to do the same thing in other areas of their lives?
No. We see a broad spectrum of people. Sometimes they are business owners and career people, but we have people from all different walks of life. In fact, we're an international marriage coaching company, so we coach people from all over the world. We have clients from Australia, New Zealand, sometimes South Africa, over in the UK, Canada. And so they're going to see a lot of variety of people. But the most important thing is that you get a custom approach to you and what you're facing in your marriage, because it's like a thumbprint, right? It's so unique to you. You need a custom approach on how to resolve those issues.
What would you say is some of the biggest points that people can use that would make pivots in their relationship so they can find that happiness?
I had a comment on that. In terms of finding happiness within a relationship, I think a good bit of advice that I remember hearing some time ago was to try and clear up or try and create clear agreements. I think there's so many instances of relationship trouble that come about because there are uncommunicated expectations, or because there are certain things that are, once again, expected within the relationship that haven't actually been agreed upon. And so it's easy to, quietly resent all these little bits of tension, these little arguments, these little problems within the relationship. But if you're really looking for happiness, it's best to sit down, talk about what is wanted, have some clear requests, and find ways together to support those wants and needs. Like a lot of people, a very common complaint within marriage might be something like sexual intimacy, as an example, and either one partner or another being dissatisfied. And I think there's so much that could be done by sitting down and saying, hey, look, why is there some hesitation here? Can we what's actually wanted on both sides? How can we come together to meet some of these needs, and just have a really open, sort of safe environment to have these really deep conversations that, for many couples that do get to this crisis point, tend to push to the side or push down or just ignore.
Is it because they're just unsure of how to have these conversations that they kind of get stuck?
No, I think a lot of times it's, as individuals, we believe that we make these bids for solutions, or we make these bids for attention or for needs. And it's not always easy to recognize those bids from your partner. I think it's really easy, as everyone is raised in different environments and different families of origins, to misread some of the cues, or to have different expectations. So I think a lot of times what happens is someone makes some bids for needs, for some bids for attention or communication, and they become frustrated as those bids are ignored, as they might put it, ignored or pushed down or pushed aside or dismissed, when that might not always be the intention of the partner. But I think this is at the heart of where all this frustration comes from, and why things start to feel impossible, and why couples end up considering the divorce is, after enough times of making these bids and being frustrated, it feels like there's no other solution. There's no other way to handle this other than to pull further apart.
So when we look at the coaching that the both of you do, Heather, do you coach both husband and wife together, or are they separate? How do you go about doing that?
We actually encourage clients to start on their own, even if their spouse is willing to do it with them, which most often is not the case. I'd say, Mark, you could probably give a better figure, but about 85, 90% of our clients have a spouse that is completely checked out, unwilling to work on the marriage with them, not wanting to come to sessions. And in fact, pushing them to come to do the coaching would be something we would not recommend, because that is only going to push them further away. That would be like putting the pressure on them, and they're only going to want to back away more, which is the opposite of what we want in this case, right? And so we work with one person initially. And then eventually, when the relationship is at a healthy, more stable place, not healthy fully, but, more stable, their partner's willing to talk to them, willing to work on things, even wanting to improve things, that's when we find it appropriate to bring them into the coaching as well. So that's typically how our clients' journey works, is that they work with us one-on-one while they're implementing the changes that we give them with their spouse until we assess the situation and we say, okay, now it's appropriate time to bring your partner into it. So that then we can go into maybe some of the deeper issues. We can have some of those, root issues resolved, and then bring the relationship into full healing and balance.
Yeah, to be clear, like bringing the couple together for those sort of sessions is always the ideal situation. It's just, as Heather was putting it, not every couple is ready right when they start with us. And there's just too much tension, not enough willingness to sit down and listen, or there's not enough trust in the process or the changes that need to be made, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think that word that Heather used is really good, in that we are trying to create some stability within the relationship so those sort of sessions are more successful.
You find it in a lot of ways, it's teaching people almost like a new language in how they speak and connect with one another.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of viewing it. I think a lot of like, let's take a simple concept like empathy. I might talk about empathy, and to me, it means there's a very rich definition of the word. There's a lot of different nuances to what empathy is. But as I approach some of my clients and talk about, hey, let's provide a bit more empathy, and I come to realize what empathy means to them, I do have to teach them almost like a new language around that. I see so many mistakes, as someone perceives that they are being empathetic, but really when we look at those interactions and look at how they're executing it, it ultimately ends up in some cases that I deal with it, they end up being dismissive in their attempt to convey some empathy. Once again, if we're just using this specific concept, a common mistake there might be something like this sort of yeah, but statement. Like, yeah, I can see why you might feel this way, but you shouldn't have done, whatever the hypothetical problem is. And they might come away saying, yeah, I express some understanding. I express some empathy, when, the reality in that sort of situation is it wasn't that. It was ultimately dismissive. And so, yeah, it is like a new language. And let's extend this across many other concepts now, not just empathy, but like, trying to build up some repair work within the relationship, or being able to communicate deeply about sensitive topics, and becomes quite a once we're at the end of this whole process with clients, and they're able to have this very rich, meaningful, deep conversations with their spouse, it's really rewarding.
If you just look at the statistics too, right? So like over 50% of marriages in the United States are ending in divorce. That right there should be pretty glaringly obvious that we do not know how to have healthy relationships. Right. And so if your marriage is struggling, one thing that we say is it's really not your fault, because not saying you don't have accountability for your choices, because you do, but the majority of people are really not taught how to communicate. We're not taught how to have healthy boundaries. We're not taught how to identify needs and meet needs and work together as a team. We're not taught how to handle conflict in healthy ways. And so it's really not your fault that you haven't been taught those things. And the good news is, though, is that you can learn them, kind of like learning a different language. Right. But you can learn these skills, you can learn these principles. And we've seen that people from all different kinds of walks of life, people just like you and me, can absolutely learn them and can totally change the trajectory of their relationship to have the kind of fulfillment, the healthy, functional relationship that they want to have.
I think that's probably very encouraging for a lot of people, especially when, they're just, maybe they have no roadmap of what looks healthy as far as relationships go. Do you think that within the last 10 years that just relationships themselves have been a little bit more difficult, as when it comes to these learned habits, learned behaviors, because people are so detached from one another?
It's an interesting question. I could certainly see where you're coming from there, and like the idea that as we become more reliant on, say, devices or all this virtual communication, has it become more difficult to have these meaningful interactions with someone in person? And I think it's hard to say exactly where all of this is taking us as a society. My personal opinion is that I personally believe that all of these changes with how we interact with technology and how things have progressed, especially in the last 20 years, does certainly have an impact on how we interact with others. And as Heather was pointing out, like, what are we actually learning as we are growing up? And how are we learning to settle some differences? And how are we learning to deal with people who disagree with us? Not to get too political, but I think even if we look at the current political climate, we can see that there's this huge divide in being able to sit for a moment and consider someone else's point of view and consider it still valid, even though they might disagree with you. And certainly if we mix that sort of more recent phenomenon mixed with some of the technological advancements that have been made, I do think that this is going to have a big impact on how successful relationships continue to be within our society.
Well, thank goodness for the both of you. There's hope, so people don't have to throw in the towel. Heather, what do you want our listeners to really understand about High Thrive coaching?
Well, before they understand anything about us, I'd like them to understand something about themselves. And that is that you are good enough and you are worthy of love, and you can obtain it as you learn how, like you learn the principles that lead to a healthy and functional relationship. And we are here to support you if you're ready to make those changes. We help those that are committed and coachable and willing to do what it takes to get there. To me, it's worth everything to look back at the challenges in my life and know that I did them the very best that I could. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I want to live my life with no regrets, right? That I know I did my very best and that I moved forward, that I overcame my own weaknesses, that I overcame my own challenges and the challenges in my life and my relationships so that I can have peace of mind. And to me, that's worth everything. So High Thrive Coaching is here to support people that are on a similar journey and they want the same thing for themselves.
Where can our listeners connect with you and learn more about High Thrive Coaching?
So the best place would be our website, highthrivecoaching.com. That's like high five, just high thrive. And you can also go join our Facebook group. We have over 40,000 members. So we're one of the fastest growing online marriage resources out there. And that is the Thriving Marriage Facebook group. You can also listen to our podcast called The Thriving Marriage.
Well, Heather and Marc, thank you both so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you for having us, Marianne.
On that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. We've been speaking with Heather Choate and Marc Johnston in regards to their marriage coaching, High Thrive Coaching. We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
If you want to stop divorce fast, you do not need to waste years in therapy. You do not need to work on yourself, and you do not even have to have your spouse on board. If your spouse wants out, if they're filing for divorce, separation, or having an affair, what you need is a proven process to turn your marriage around. Book a free breakthrough session with us at highthrivecoaching.com/apply.
I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Well, thank you, Heather Choate and Marc Johnston. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about High Thrive Coaching. If you'd like to learn more about High Thrive Coaching, make sure to visit their website, highthrivecoaching.com. Be part of their community and learn how you can transform your marriage. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.